Welcome back. And now the issue of the Health Promotion Levy or sugar tax has been controversial in the sugar production industry. South Africa was the first on the continent to introduce the levy back in 2018. Producers have come forth to speak about the impact the tax has had not only on the beverage sector, but on the supply chain of the sugar production as well. However, studies contradicting these claims have also come about, stating otherwise, that it has not only been the health promotion levy that has negatively impacted this industry. So today we get insights from both perspectives, and joining me to do that is Heala, Executive Director of BVSA, and Nzama Mbalati, Interim Acting CEO of Heala. Good afternoon to you both, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. Maybe we'll start with you here, Nzama, because of course, you've been a huge proponent of this sugar tax and, making sure that it is implemented. What was the rationale here?
So the sugar tax or sugary drinks tax, sugar sweetened beverages tax, because the media calls it the sugar tax, has been that South Africa is having a tsunami of an exponential growth of health conditions that are linked with the overconsumption of sugar. Sugary drinks being the unhealthy beverages, really, because sugar in a liquid format, because remember, a fruit also does contain sugar, is problematic because of how the body has to metabolize and absorb that liquid sugar that you take. So with the evidence that was coming from the World Institution health bodies, such as the World Health Organization, that actually recommended as one of way of curbing the consumption, the overconsumption of sugar sweetened beverages, be taxation, because we know taxation is not new. Taxation on unhealthy products such as tobacco, carbon tax, alcohol, and so on. Then South Africa wanted to put as one of other measures in the obesity prevention strategy to introduce the sugar sweetened beverage tax to actually support South Africans. Actually, this is not actually even an excise tax that is similar to sin taxes. It's a taxation that was introduced in the form of actual incentives to encourage the sugar beverage manufacturers to actually diversify and actually reformulate to avoid this taxation. So it's not like a penal where it's a must for you to pay because you can actually look at the actual issue of reformulation as a way of avoiding the tax. So this was one of the tools in the toolbox that the National Department of Health, working with Treasury, looked at as a way of reducing the sugar consumption and obesity and its related health conditions.
Wonderful. I want to bring you on here, Paul, because of course, you sit at the place of implementation of the tax here. Let's talk about what you've had to do, the reformulation and the reconfiguration of your product to ensure that you comply.
Thank you. And let me just touch base on the issue of reformulation of our products. It's not a new thing. It's always been there. We have always, our industry constantly evolves. We try to identify consumer needs and we try to model ourselves according to what the new and ever-changing consumer requirements are. So it is true to an extent that we expedited that process at the onset of the HPL, the Health Promotion Levy or sugar tax, as it were. It is quite important. We keep on doing this. We've been doing this even before the sugar tax, and we'll continue doing this. It's important that we model ourselves according to, firstly, the legal requirements that bound our industry, and secondly, we need to make sure that we also offer the consumers what the consumers are asking of us. If the consumers are saying, you have too much of this in this product, or you have less of this in this product, we are in an industry that keeps on reinventing itself.
With that said, Nzama, then I want to bring it back to you here. Based on the rationale behind implementing the sugar tax or the HPL here, is there evidence that, there has been less exposure to diseases such as diabetes? The health benefit there, has it been adequately measured, and is it making a difference?
Is that for me?
No, sorry, that was for Nzam. For Nzam.
All right.
Yes.
So thank you so much for such a critical question. So We rely on studies, really. There's a study that was done around the consumption since the health promotion levy of sugar sweetened beverages, since the health promotion levy was introduced. And these studies were done in Langa and Soweto, and that's Cape Town in Johannesburg. And they found that particularly among youth and what you will call high consumers, that there have been actually up to threefold of reduction in the consumption of sugar. So I mean, in that objective, in that objective, it shows that yes, the sugar sweetened beverages tax has been working. We don't know of other like national-wide scale study, but I think this was a not a model study, but a randomized study, which I think the facts on the ground shows that the health promotion levy has been working for what it has been intended to in terms of health benefits and health rationale.
And as the sector, and Paul, what's the real, impact of having implemented the levy?
Thank you. We skipped the most important step. I forgot to say good day, Nzama.
Yeah.
And maybe as a follow-up, and I'm linking it to this very same question that you're asking. Maybe I need to take you back, a step back, and I'll take just a minute to sort of give you a better picture. At the onset and during the negotiations, consultation process, we exchange material, science from industry, and other interested parties also exchange science and the material that they thought would actually be, beneficial for their case. All of us, including our industry, we all accept and acknowledge that internationally, not only in South Africa, we have a serious crisis of obesity, and we all need to play a role in that. But then in doing that, we then realized that from the studies that we also shared with government, that it was clear that the drivers of obesity are quite enormous, and they're not necessarily the same everywhere. Let me make a point in case. What drives obesity in Sandton might not necessarily be the case with what drives obesity in, say, maybe Lusikisiki or Mabele Apudi. I'm just making an example. And there's scientific data to that. So it then became clear that we needed to collect and work closely with government and to make sure that there's proper science that informs that decision making. So a decision was then taken at NEDLAC that the Department of Health needs to commission what we call a total dietary intake study. And there was also a need to conduct what we call SEAS, a socio-economic impact assessment study. So ordinarily, or in the true sense of how things should happen, those both studies should actually happen before the enactment. So you need to have a localized science based on real numbers, based on real science, that talks to the regional dynamics, local dynamics of South Africa across different geographies. So now the total dietary intake study was primarily meant to sort of tell us what are the key drivers of obesity in South Africa across various geographies, different LSMs, different communities. So that is the study. So we enacted this without that study, right? And we also enacted this without conducting a socio-economic impact assessment study. So there was a cabinet decision of 2015 that any laws or legislation that's likely to affect livelihoods must be subjected to that process. So we went ahead with the sugar tax in South Africa without any of those. What did we rely on? What did we base that on? We based that on science from other countries. We base that on science from and information from the WHO, which, by the way, has been yo-yoing. It's been a yo-yo effect in terms of taxation, whether it should tax products or not. It's been on and off. So that's where the problem is. We have implemented the tax. It's probably now it's in its sixth year, but we haven't seen any results. The tax hasn't worked in South Africa. It hasn't worked anywhere. This tax will never help to fight obesity anywhere. There are countries where this tax, it's kept at 100%, but obesity rates are still growing. So we're saying as industry, we still want to work with government and get the real science behind this and work with government and model solutions, because we're saying focusing on one ingredient in the fight against obesity, it's a misnomer. It's a misguided approach, and it's misleading, because you're singling out one ingredient in a very complex health problem. Obesity is a very, very complex health challenge. You cannot single one ingredient as the problem, and you will never get. That's why in South Africa we're not seeing any changes in the obesity ratio. The numbers are still not going down, the numbers are still going up. But yes, a tax that's still causing a job, that's having a negative impact on the economy. You probably have seen the Labour Court decision this week from one of our members, where the court affirmed that it is true that our industry has been impacted by a sugar tax negatively, and that's why it led to jobs. A study was then conducted by NEDLEC to sort of, assess how the tax fared the first year of its implementation, and it was clear. I mean, out of that, that study records about 16,400 job losses in the first year of the implementation of the sugar tax. That is not our information. That's the information from NEDLEC, the study that was commissioned and conducted by NEDLEC. So from where we're standing, the sugar tax is not working, but it's still continuing to cause problems. And by the way, sorry, just last point. If this tax was not, if this tax was truly about health promotion, why is the money collected from the billions, by the way, collected in sugar tax? Why is it not ring-fenced for health promotion? So that has always been our question, that if it was truly about health promotion, why is the money collected on sugar tax not used towards health promotion?
Thank you for that, Nzama. Let's come back to you here.
But a similar concern as well.
Yes. Nzama, let's bring you in here. I actually want to get your thoughts on some of the points that Mpo has made here. He has spoken about, localized studies being done here, and even enacting the law without us necessarily doing localized socioeconomic studies. Let's talk about that. But I'm also keen to speak about the focus on beverages, and maybe not on sweets and chocolates, on other confectionery items here. If that is the aim in the long term, the rationale maybe of also focusing specifically on beverages, if we're looking at the whole obesity and all that contributes to it.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And I think, like, in reflecting to some of the comments, I think I want to just explain quite a few things. So one of the things is that it's not only sugar sweetened beverages or sugar that is regulated. In 2016, in 2013, if not 2016, I'm not sure about the year, the government introduced the salt regulation, particularly on staple foods such as bread. So the bread that we used to eat couple of years in the 80s, 90s, not the same as a mandatory. It's a regulation that the National Department of Health introduced. So I think it's not only, we have to put into context that it's not only sugar that is targeted. So all unhealthy ingredients in food that are problematic. So your saturated fat, your excess salt and sugar, and sodium. It's really important that people can have a reduction in the intake. So that's number one. So because it's not factual that it's only it's just that it's at the sugar sweetened beverage are taxed, but there are regulations that are looking at other problematic ingredients in diet, such as the salt intake regulation. And I think one other thing I think that is important is, I think, look, living in this country, and I think as also as a person who's living from the previously disadvantaged population, I don't think there's anyone who wants to collapse the sugar industry, or who even the work of that Heala does. And I think in all this economic rationale and this self-reported studies, and which I think one of the things we've been calling for from NEDLEC was, can you make the information available about your study?
Yeah.
We didn't even to fight about that, so that other agencies can also look at the odds that you have used in the study, because with the problem that we have with NEDLAC is that now it's lacking the voice of civil society and people. It has become a space of business. So this could easily be a self-reported study. But that being said, it's important, even if it's like one job that is lost in the kind of economy and the country that we live in, that we have to be all to be up in arms. But one of the critical things, and I think Impo is also critical, is the issue of diversification. And I think one of the things that we have been, and we think the South African government has been lenient to the sugar industry, because tomorrow, what happens if tobacco says we don't want to be regulated because we lose job? Alcohol can come and say we don't want to be regulated because we lose job. Why are we not diversifying with our peers? Brazil, India, we're not talking about rich countries, but diversification into ethanol, it's a booming, sustainable business that when the sugar tax came into effect, we ought to actually start moving and transitioning into the biofuel and tapping into that booming market to have sustainable jobs, to make sure that, so I think the sugar industry has to look at its own backyard in as much as pointing fingers and address things as corruption, the Tonga Tullet issue, good business practice, and always be disingenuous and scapegoating about government intervention on things like this, because what happened to the cheap sugar imports that were coming in the country? The sugar manufacturers had deserted the local sugar producers, small-scale farmers, and went and import cheap sugar. Why are we not addressing about all these issues that we ought to speak about?
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time, and I really want to get us all to our next appointment. And I do apologize, because I do think this conversation could do with a part 2 at some point, and maybe we can organize that. But I'd like to thank you both for the perspective. I think certainly shedding light on something that's very topical at this time. That was the interim acting CEO of Heala, Nzama Mbalati, and Executive Director of BVSA, Mpho Totela.